recommendations from the Russians because they know that NATO allies, including the US, will have their backs, basically.
I think that they're feeling, as you put it, relatively safe, but not absolutely safe. As you know, the history of Poland and Russia, the antagonism between Poland and Russia goes back a long time, centuries. And so, and Russia shows nothing but contempt for Europe, but also particularly for Poland and what the Russians call it, the Polish pretensions to be a great power. And so they feel relatively safe with NATO, with the Americans particularly, but not absolutely safe.
Okay, we have Mr. Maher Nicolas again with us. Let's ask you now, from a geopolitical perspective, what are the broader implications of Poland's military build-up for the region?
I'm delighted to join you today, and apologies for the tech issue we had earlier.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Now I think we are reconnected, so I'm glad. Listen, I don't want to sound like a Machiavellian contrarian, but I'll do it anyway. I think, we've entered in the age of geoeconomics. What do I mean? So the world changed a lot 8 months ago when President Trump entered the White House for the second term, because his second term is very different from the first. Why? Because he completely decimated the neoconservative cadre of the Republican Party. His own party, Trump got rid of the pro-NATO neoconservatives. Within the Democrat Party, which was until recently controlled by what Americans call liberal hoax, pro-NATO center-left Democrats, a lot like Tusk, the current Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, he talks a lot like center-left Democrat liberal hoax because he's one of them, right? And now with the rise of Mamdani and Ocasio-Cortez, even inside the Democratic Party in America, the pro-NATO liberal hoax are being also decimated. So America changed dramatically, and then the pro-NATO wing of both left Democrats and right conservatives, they're being decimated. So now where are the neoconservative, the warmongering, pro-NATO, neoconservative, Blairites, liberal hoax, where are they? They're no longer in Washington, but they are present in government in Warsaw, Paris, and Berlin. And it's sad, and I'm saying this as a neutral observer, so between Russia and NATO, I try to remain very cold because I'm a neo-realist, and because I'm a neo-realist, I refuse to take sides, right? Mm-hmm. As a cold observer, in the age of geoeconomics, there's one thing which matters. The GDP of Poland today is equal to approximately $1 trillion. The GDP of Russia today is only $2 trillion. Russia, 2 trillion, Poland, 1 trillion. When the Soviet Union, when Soviet Russia collapsed, when communism collapsed in 1991, the GDP of Russia was 16 times more that of Poland. So that puts things into perspective. The Poles have nothing to fear. These fears are exaggerated by propaganda. And today Russia is it's a rapidly declining country, economically, financially, industrially. So I think, that Russia is a boogeyman for warmongering. There's a warmongering war party in Brussels, in Warsaw, and these people, for them, war is a business. So instead of trying to find a middle-of-the-road solution, the only way to have a peace deal is to make concessions on both sides to find a middle-of-the-road solution, which is what President Trump seeks, right?
Yes.
Which is what India and Egypt and Saudi Arabia also believe in. But Europe today is controlled by these Bush, Blairite neocons. And, there's a famous saying in America that typically a chicken can run around 10 minutes after its head is cut off, right? And so the neocons in Warsaw, Paris, and Berlin, they are still running, even so the ideas behind their politics are dead.
But wouldn't you say, sir, that the Poles do relatively have some fears when it comes to the Russians, especially given the drone incursions that we've seen across their airspace?
Well, it's true, but it cuts both ways. So first, about the drone incursions, right?
Yes.
That drone incursion crisis started precisely 7 weeks ago. And 7 weeks ago in Denmark, Holland, France, and Poland, it was front-page news. And they all accused Russian operatives or Bulgarian or Serbian operatives working for the KGB or some silly propaganda shtick of being behind the drone incursions. And 1 week later, the police in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and also said, oh no, we are not sure it's Russia. It could be someone else. So this is to a large extent propaganda. Now, of course, using bases in Belarus and Russia, the Russians are testing NATO defenses. Yes. That is true. Just like NATO is doing the same. So using bases in Estonia, Lithuania, and Poland, NATO is constantly testing the defenses. So it's a game, it's a dirty game. They both play. The Russians play that game, the Poles also. That's normal if you have a Cold War or hot war mentality. But I think the drone issue is overblown, magnified. Why is it magnified? Very briefly. Who is Donald Tusk, the current Polish Prime Minister? Who is Andrei Yermak, the all-powerful chief of staff of the Ukrainian presidency? These people come from what field? They are all either former historians or former movie producers. And it tells you a lot. So the people running Ukraine and Poland are former right-wing historian ideologues like Donald Tusk, or former movie producers like Andrei Yermak. And these people believe in propaganda because it's their job, right? When you're a historian or a nationalist movie producer, propaganda is your job. And now they're running Poland, Ukraine, and they're trying to export their ideas to the world.
So would you say, sir, that this tactic of what you described as fear-mongering basically is the path towards a new Cold War?
Well, they want to. They want to have a new Cold War. But the problem is what? America is uninterested precisely because inside the Republican Party, the neocons were decimated by Trump. Inside the Democrats left, the likes of Ocasio-Cortez and Mamdani had completely decimated the pro-NATO hoax. So basically, Europe alone cannot start a new Cold War. Why? Because America is busy focusing on one single issue, the technological, industrial, military rivalry with China. So America is focusing aggressively on the Asia-Pacific area, and they couldn't care less about the security of Estonia, Poland, or Zimbabwe.
Okay, Mr. Williams, can we get your take here? Now, you heard Mr. Nicolas there talking about the idea of neocons in Europe and how this is fear-mongering. Do you agree with this idea that it's not necessarily as bad as it's made out to be?
Yes, Nicolas Firzli is a very perceptive commentator, and I fear that, yes, there are elements of exaggeration in this scenario, but there are also elements of psychology and real fear, and the aggression towards Ukraine by Russia, which broke all the rules and agreements even before the Cold War, but since the Cold War, inevitably leads to a confrontation, and it's going to get worse rather than better. And yes, I do believe that, as Nicolas said, there is an element of exaggeration and also self-interest, financial and industrial self-interest by the United States. But the Europeans believe that they need the United States. So the Europeans are vulnerable because of their own beliefs. And this is a problem we can't break out of, this perennial psychological fear and dependency that the Europeans have. Otherwise, I think this scenario is exaggerated to an extent, but the problem is we can't break out of it.
Well, Mr. Nicolas, could Poland's rapid militarization risk dividing rather than uniting Europe's security strategy? I know you're not very optimistic about neocons in Europe in general. Could this play into it? Mr. Nicolas?
Apologies, I didn't hear your question. Apologies.
Let me repeat my question. Could Poland's rapid militarization risk dividing rather than uniting Europe when it comes to the security strategy, given what you just said as well when it comes to neocons in Europe?
Well, Poland is lucky. Poland is lucky for a reason, for a series of coincidences, because in countries like Greece, for example, or Bulgaria or Romania, or even France, by the way, in Italy, public opinion is hostile to the neocons and liberal hopes. But, there were a series of elections in Europe, and the anti-NATO, if you will, or the neutralists or the Gaullist people who are not enthusiastic about a war against Russia, these people are in the opposition now in Romania, Greece, France, and Italy, even though public opinion supports their foreign policy anti-NATO ideas. To make a long story short, Poland is lucky because most governments today, even though they are very unpopular, like the French government of Macron, but they are in power, right? So most governments in power today in most European capitals, they support NATO. And they like the idea of reindustrializing, spending money on military hardware, using Russia as a reason, or pretext, or a combination of real reason, fake pretext. The problem is financial. Poland can afford to do so. So Poland is rich enough today, its economy is growing enough, its government debt is relatively small. So countries like Poland, clearly they can play that game and they can raise to 4.5, 5, 6% of GDP. The problem is countries like Spain or Italy, for example, or even France. They don't have the financial means to do so, even if they want to. So you have a very interesting example to answer your question. Prime Minister Sanchez in Madrid, the Spanish Prime Minister, he's pro-NATO. He's very pro-NATO. He's in the mold of Hillary Clinton or Tony Blair. He's the liberal hoax. So he says that he hates Russia, pro-NATO. But at the same time, he says, no, I don't want to spend any money on military hardware or equipment. So even when there's a will to do so, there may not be the financial means, and I think that's a big problem. Money is a problem.
Okay, Mr. Williams, could we get your take here as well? Now, we've seen Poland's military ambitions, and could this possibly inspire other NATO countries that are near to Russia? And do you agree that also, even if they feel this inspiration, that they do want to, excel militarily, they don't have the means, like Mr. Nicolas just said there?
Well, I think the leaders of these NATO countries had a meeting at a NATO meeting in The Hague in June of this year, and they agreed to extraordinarily raise their defense and security related expenditure to 5% of GDP by 2035. And I personally didn't believe that this was possible, but they want to please and appease President Trump. But as you know, I am currently in the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic, like other Eastern European countries, Central Eastern European countries, and say, for example, Slovakia, Hungary, the population is split. They have fears. They believe that Russia is unpredictable. So they know something must be done, but they don't want to divert their prosperity or their welfare spending into defense spending. And so the European publics are I don't think they're illogical, but they have two objectives in mind. One is to keep themselves safe with NATO. They believe that NATO is an organization that can keep themselves safe, but they don't want to invest in their defenses because it'll mean financial hardship.
Okay, Mr. Nicolas, if we can get your take here. Now, you said Poland is faring better now economically, but some analysts have warned that there could be some economic strain when it comes to the massive military spending that they're doing right now. Do you think this is something that is sustainable for Poland?
In short, the answer is yes for the next 2-3 years. So Poland has the macroeconomic, financial leeway, resources, room for maneuver, if you will, to play that game for the next 3 years. Now, beyond that, of course, it may have adverse effects on their economy. It's a double-edged sword. A lot of the money they're spending, I would estimate 40 or 45% of the money they're spending goes to made in Poland military hardware and ammunition. So to a certain extent, it can be good for the Polish economy, for Polish industry, but a lot also, 55% of it goes to American weapon manufacturers. So it's helping, the likes of McDonnell Douglas or Raytheon in America churn out weapons. So, it's good for American industry. I suspect that's why President Trump wants to force their hand, because he knows that 50, 60, 70% of the defense budget of Europe will go to American corporations. It's good for the U.S. Very quickly, if I can make one quick comment, I'm aware of time. That game, which now is being played on the border between Poland and Russia, is a small game. Because once again, I insist, the main show, the big show, is the American-Chinese rivalry, which is defining the world economy, the world politics, world whatever, for the next 200 years, right? So it's a small show. And that small show, being played by small players, because today the Russians and the Poles are mid-sized or small players, is reminiscent to another game played 100 years ago between the British and the Russians. And that was a game that Moscow and London played 100 years ago for the control of Central Asia. Back then, England and Russia were superpowers. And what's very interesting, that game, the British gave it a French name. So the British military planners and diplomats called it Le Grand Jeu, the great game. And then the Russians did not give it the same name. The Russians gave it a Turkish name. They called it the rivalry of shadows. Yes. The tournament of shadows. Because for the Russians, that rivalry happened in the dark, on the border, skirmishes on the border, special ops on the border, using fumes, using artifacts, using artificial,